Hello everyone, welcome back to Brama Talks, a monthly webinar series organized by Brama Grodzka Teatr NN from Lublin, Poland. If it's the first time you're hearing about our institution, I encourage you to watch the first Brama Talks from last month, which has already been published on YouTube, and where you can learn all about our institution, which is a municipal cultural center dedicated to the memory of the Jews of Lublin. My name is Agata Radkowska-Parka, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today on behalf of Brama Grodzka. We are joined today by participants from the US, Canada, Brazil, Israel, Great Britain, as well as other countries, altogether something like 14 different locations and at least few time zones. So whether it's morning or evening for you, I am very happy you've decided to spend this time with us. Since traveling today is much more complicated than it was even a few months ago, here in Brama, we came up with the idea of finding a solution. Not to replace in-person meetings here in Lublin, where you are always welcome, but to allow us to be in touch and to share with you a little bit of our work here in Brama. Through Brama Talks, you will meet Brama Grodzka staff as well as our dear friends, mostly Lubliners, as we call descendants of Lublin Jews. During these meetings within the upcoming months, you will have a chance to hear lectures and presentations and take part in some virtual tours, all focused on the history and memory of Lublin Jews. Before I introduce today's guests, I would like to explain some logistics. Normally, we have a conversation followed by Q&A. Today is an exception, and the whole hour will be dedicated to the conversation between our guests. You are very welcome to use the chat, which you should see on the right-hand side of your screen. I encourage you to say hi there, maybe let us know where are you viewing us from or what's your connection to Lublin. If you wish to ask a question, please feel free to do so using Q&A mode, but note that if it's a question to our guest, we will respond privately after the meeting. Regarding questions about Brama Grodzka and Brama Talks program, we will try to answer within the chat. Those of you who have been in Lublin before probably recognize that I'm in Sala Czarna, the black hole, which is the heart of Brama Grodzka. And from here, I have a great pleasure to welcome our guests, Lublin survivor Judy Josephs, assisted by her daughter, Ruth Joseph, who are joining us from New York, and Ruth and Judy's cousin, Dani Admon, who is in Israel and who will facilitate this conversation. Judy may have hearing problems, especially in this format, so Ruth may occasionally repeat to her something that Dani said or asked. I would like Dani, Judy, and Ruthie to join us now. Welcome. It's very nice to see you, and thank you so much for accepting my invitation. The last time when we met in person was in November in Israel during the annual Lubliners meeting when no one expected the corona crisis. And here we are today meeting again, but this time online. So without further ado, Dani, you are welcome to start the conversation.
Well, hello everybody, and thank you for taking the time to join us. Hi Ruthie, how Judy, how you doing?
Hi Dani. Hi.
And how Agatha? Well, my name is Dani Admon, and I'm a second-generation survivor. I was born in 1952 in Israel. I belong to the generation which saw itself as first to Geulah, redemption, first-generation Israelis, first generation to a new nation, a new breed of Jews. No more escaping, no more bowing our heads facing the enemy, no more like sheep to a slaughter, or at least this is how we saw it. I was Mordecai Anilevich, the way Nathan Rapoport portrayed him. Like in the monument, big, ready to take on the whole world. I was a Sabra, thorny on the outside and sweet inside. When I grew up, the survivors were a large part of our society. I had friends in my class taught to sleep with their shoes on, with mothers who wouldn't let them out of sight, with strange-looking people with strange behaviors we did not understand. When I asked my mom about any of them, I would get a tug like this, a tug on my sleeve and a whisper, shh, they are from there. The code word, from there. The code of silence, which was broken only in the Eichmann trial in 1961. I was intrigued by those bluish numbers on the arms, but wasn't allowed to ask. They were transparent people from there. Soaps, we call them. Soaps, hinting to the rumors that the Nazi made soap of their fat. But soap is also, in our slang, in Hebrew, it meant nerd, yellow, chicken, someone afraid. We told jokes about them, thinking they were hilarious. We didn't want to listen to them. They, on the other hand, didn't and couldn't talk. We never spoke about Shoah at home. I always thought that my family was not in the Shoah. My father came from Lublin at the age of 8 in 1924, and my mom from Austria at the age of 16 in 1934. I never thought about the family they left behind as a part of my family. So this is the atmosphere of my first meeting with Judy in 1960. Judy came with Reuben to my brother's mayor's bar mitzvah. I remember a pretty blonde with a fair coat around her shoulders trying to catch and hug me. I got away. I was just 8 years old. To me, they were the relatives from America. Wow, America. America. Always smiling and pleasant, but some distant sadness in her eyes. My grandfather, Shmuel, was a teacher. He was born in 1887 to a family of 6 brothers and 1 sister. Shmuel moved to Lublin and opened in 1913 a school for Jewish boys, which was a part of the Yavne network of schools on Ribna Street. Shmuel married Rochale Sternblitz and had my father Raphael Yitzchak in 1916 and his sister Sarah in 1918, who herself married her cousin Chaim Sternblitz in July 1942 in Lubliner, of course. What else? In 1923, Shmuel closed the school and moved to Palestine. He was a Zionist. He sent for his family in 1924 and they settled in Tel Aviv. Him and 2 other brothers survived the war. The other 4 and their families didn't. On my mother's side, there was never a talk about the Shoah. I only knew they left Austria before the war. So all these years, I kept on meeting Judy. I even lived for some time in her house in Monsey. Not a word about the past. Whenever I tried to bring it up, she would cut it by saying, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. I only knew that her sons were called after her father and brothers, and her daughter after her mother and sister. Being the Israeli I was, I didn't bother too much. My first trip to Poland was in 1999. It didn't leave any mark on me. But in 2005, 6 years later, I started having little dreams with bits and pieces of my trip to Poland in 1999. It all came back to me. Then I found this document in one of my mother's closets. That shook me. My grandfather on my mother's side on an official Nazi document with a swastika on it? What's going on? It haunted me to a point where my whole life changed. I started reading, watching movies, listening to survivors talk, and at the end of this year, I even enrolled to the tour guide course in Yad Vashem. My cycle was complete. For the first time, I asked questions, but now I wanted answers. About the same time, Ruthie, my cousin, delved into investigating our family ties and building an unbelievable family tree. All of you who know her know that once Ruthie sets her mind on doing something, it will be done and in the best way. Once I started traveling about 5 to 6 times a year to Poland, Judy and I started having little conversations about her memories, but they all ended up abruptly when she started talking about the Poles, whom she saw all as anti-Semites. I don't want to talk about it. Our cycles finally met. Gradually, she opened up and started sharing. The opportunity created by the amazing people of the NN back in 2017 was too tempting to pass. Ruthie did her wonders, and suddenly I got the message. We are coming to the reunion. It was like something that was locked in for so many years, just exploded. After all, you can get out of Poland, but you cannot get Poland out of you. It is my pleasure to introduce my special aunt, Judy, and my very good friend, her daughter, Ruthie. Judy, I call you my aunt. My wife and kids call you my aunt. Are you really my aunt?
Are you really his aunt? I didn't get it. Are you really his aunt? Am I Lily Bent? Are you really his aunt? No, I'm not. I'm not your aunt. Your grandparents were cousins of my mother, first cousins. Both grandparents, because they both cousins also.
Well, complicated, small village. What was your Polish or maiden name?
Say it again. What was your Polish or maiden name? Jochweta Finkelstein.
Judy, did you know about my grandfather and his family because they moved to Israel before you were born?
But I very often visited my Aunt Tema, who was a sister of your grandmother. And I had always looked at this nice, large picture of your grandparents with their 2 small children. And I asked about it, and that they told me who they were, and that they left for Palestine, and that your grandfather had a school in Lublin before he left.
Can you tell me about your family before the war?
Can you tell him about your family before the war, who they were? My father's name was Chone. My mother's name was Rachel. And I had 3 brothers and a sister. The oldest brother, I only used to see during vacations because he's studying veterinarian in Warsaw at the university. And my second brother was 2 years younger. My oldest brother was 16 years older than I. And my other brother was, his name was Itchy. And my other brother, whose name was Ellie, he was 2 years younger. And he was extremely bright also. And he was self-taught because my father could not afford to send another child for higher education. And then I had a sister by the name of Brona. She was 8 years older than I. And a brother Moshe, who was a few years older than I.
So altogether, you were 5. Okay. What did your parents do for a living? What was the economic situation?
My father had a tailor shop, and my mother was a homemaker.
And what was the economic situation?
Well, we were not poor, but I realized that they struggled. Probably had to do with the cost of the education of my brother. And, we we were in much better off condition than a lot of people I'd seen.
What language did you speak at home?
We spoke both Polish and Yiddish.
What was the street you lived on? You lived on Missionarska Street?
Yeah, I lived in Missionarska. It was a very, very nice street, quiet. On the other side of the road, there was a big hill, and with a very tall wall, and on top of them with big there were those trees, gigantic. What do you call it? The trees?
Chestnut.
Chestnut trees. And there was a very large seminary, which was built around the 17th century.
Mm-hmm.
And as kids, we left playing with those chestnuts when they were falling down.
Mm-hmm. Were there many Jews? Was it a Jewish neighborhood?
It was a mixed neighborhood. There were Jews and non-Jews.
And what were the relationships with the Gentiles?
I do not recall any problems.
Do you used to play with them, with the kids?
Yeah, I played with both Gentile and Jewish kids.
Okay. Was your family religious?
They were observant. They were Shabbat observant, and they were kosher. But my father only went to synagogue on Saturdays. Otherwise, he prayed every morning at home.
Okay. Have you ever gone or have you seen the other Jewish neighborhoods of Lublin, like in the old city in Pozamcze?
There was an old city, and there was also a
Jewish quarter.
A Jewish quarter, which I hardly ever went to. And Jews just lived all over the city.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any religious education at home?
Not really. I was sent to Cheder with my brother, but I didn't last very long because I was the only girl and the boys kept pulling my braids. So I refused to go back.
Okay, so which school did you go to?
I went to a public school.
Were you a good student? I understand that your father was very proud of you.
Yeah, my report cards were very good. He used to carry them in his pocket. I guess he tried to show them off, maybe.
Did you have any limudei kodesh, religious education there at school, like Torah, Talmud, Hebrew?
Did you get any religious education at your school?
No, not at the school.
Mm-hmm.
I did want to go to a day school called Tarbut. One of my girlfriends went, and my father couldn't afford it. The tuition was very high.
I'd like to talk to you a little bit about smells and tastes. You know, Arnold Mostovoy once wrote, "I remember woods that smelled of onions and laundry." Any particular smell that you remember of Lublin, of your neighborhood, of home?
I don't remember any smells of the city or neighborhood, but I do remember smells that when I walked up the stairs to my apartment, I could smell always what my mother was baking or cooking, and I love those smells.
So what food would you call a taste of home? Any particular food?
I would say like baking the challah, usually before the Sabbath, and gefilte fish, chicken soup. Just smells like that.
Ruthie once told me a funny story that you went to the NN. When you visited the NN theater, you heard a woman calling Bubalach, Bubalach. What are Bubalach?
That was my favorite. I used to go to visit with my mother, cousins that lived in the old city. And there was always a woman that was carrying these heise Bubalach. They were like little, it was in clay pots. And I guess they used the kind of same flour that kasha is made of. And they were very hot, and she would make a slit in them and put butter in it. And they were just really, really good. I always look forward.
I can feel the taste, and this is great. Also, just some historical events you might remember. You once told me about the funeral of Marshal Pilsudski in 1935. What happened?
Yeah, that was a very sad time for Jews because he was really loved by Jews. He probably was very good to the Jews. And there was in Lublin, in the big cathedral, they had a casket that was a replica of the real one, where he was in Warsaw, of course. And my friend and I decided to go and see the replica in that cathedral, which usually Jewish kids did not go to churches. So this was a secret. We were not going to tell our parents that we did that.
Well, I'm not going to squeal myself. I'm not going to tell, but did you feel an anti-Semitism around you before the war? Were any of you or your family being affected by it?
Anti-Semitism before the war.
Anti-Semitism. Well, I did not really experience it myself, but in my class, there were some kids that came from the Jewish quarter, and they were from poor families and not well dressed and maybe not very clean. I don't remember. In any case, the Gentile kids made fun of them and called them all kind of names, and it just hurt me very much. But I had to keep quiet. I couldn't do anything about it. And also, my brother and his friend once were attacked in the park so badly by some students, and my brother was able to escape, but his friend, they broke his jaw. It's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And my father, I think, was also beaten up, but that was already during the time when the Germans came, by Poles.
Did you understand that bad times were coming before the war broke out?
Oh, well, I was a kid, you know, I didn't pay that much attention, but I remember overhearing my brother, Itchy, when he came home. This was the last time that I saw him. He came home that summer, 1939, and he said that he was definitely trying to go to Australia and then take the rest of the family, because there is no future for Jews in Poland.
When and how did the war come to Lublin?
It came in September 1st in 1939. And I'm not sure if it was the first day or second day, the bombs started dropping and we were all hiding in the cellars. And then my parents decided to escape from the city to Ostmolice, where my mother came from. It was a little town, a little village actually. And the escape was really very dangerous because there wasn't just us. I mean, a lot of people were escaping the city, and those planes were coming down so low and shooting right at the people. But we did make it in one place. It was 18 kilometers from the city.
How have your life, sorry, how have your life changed? Did you have to wear a yellow star or an armband when the Germans came in?
Yeah, when we came back to the city, at the time the Germans were occupied already. And the first thing that they did not permit Jewish kids to go to school. And then later on, we had to wear Jewish stars. And there was constantly, there were new orders being given to the Jews, what we can do and what we cannot do. And it was just getting bad.
What can you remember about moving into the ghetto, the formation of the ghetto? Do you remember anything?
Well, we were told that we have to leave where we lived and to go to a certain area. And my parents were able to trade apartments with the Poles, because the Poles had to evacuate that area for the Jews to come in. And so we had, I was very heartbroken to leave the apartment. I loved it there. And when nobody was home, I was going around and kissing the walls and crying. I was embarrassed to do it while anyone could see me. Anyway, but this first place that we went to was not terrible. Was enough rooms for us. We were okay in the first ghetto.
I believe it was on Ribna 4.
There was on Ribna 4, yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about the everyday life in the beginning of the ghetto, the conditions?
It was not bad, because I guess people in general must have known that things are going to be coming, that maybe we will not have enough food and all that. So my parents were just buying flour and any kind of goods that don't spoil and storing them in large cans. So there was enough. I don't remember being hungry in the first ghetto. It was not terrible yet, no.
But you could not go anywhere you wanted.
You couldn't go anywhere you wanted?
In the beginning, I think we were not enclosed yet. It was sort of open. Maybe,
Yeah.
You know what? I don't really remember. Sorry.
What did you do for schooling?
What did you do for schooling?
Oh, not much. I was a big reader. I love books, and I probably had enough of books. And also, my brother Ellie, who was he was really brilliant, and he was self-taught, and he knew so much about geography and history. And I think he was my tutor. He was telling me so much about so many different places. So it wasn't at the school, but I did find out many things through him.
Okay. Judy, let's move on a little bit. What happened in the beginning of March 1941 with the first action?
They came it must have been 5 a.m, knocking on the doors and telling us, out. We just had to get dressed quickly and get out, and they got us all out to the marketplace, which was on Ribna. And all the Jews were out there. And then they they took all the Jews either on trucks or walking towards the rail station, and they were taking them away. My brother started just keeping us back and back until I guess they ran out of transportation, and then they started shouting for us to go back. So we went back to our apartment.
What did you see when you got back to your apartment?
Well, it was partially robbed.
From Ribna 4, you had to move into Ghetto A on Lubatowska, and you moved to Lubatowska 43. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Right. We were lucky this time as well, because a cousin of mine who had an apartment there decided to go to Osmolice. So she offered us this apartment, and we had to share it with another family because we were not permitted to live in 2 rooms.
Okay. What were the conditions generally? I mean, outside, was it?
Well, the conditions there were completely different. We were enclosed with barbed wires. Actually, my street didn't have any, because this half of the street was included in the ghetto. On the opposite street, Gentiles were living. So, but we still could not get across. We were not permitted to go across. And there was a typhus epidemic, and of course I had to join them. So I got typhus. And my mother wanted to hide me in the apartment, not to let me go to a hospital, which was they didn't permit people to stay in the apartments. But I insisted. I was afraid for anybody else to get infected. So
was it a real hospital?
It was not a hospital really, because the hospital was filled. This was like makeshift place, and people were like 4 to a bed, and they were like dying next to me. It was terrible, just terrible. I came back. They had to carry me. I couldn't walk, but I did eventually get better.
What happened the night of the 16th of 17th in March 1942, like the beginning of the liquidation?
Yeah, I just take a drink of water.
Yeah, we'll take a little break also.
Oh, well, as long as you're drinking.
Yeah, why not? Everybody watching us, please.
Everybody have a drink of water now. It's
Everybody has a drink of water now.
I need one for that.
For the story.
There were rumors that there's going to be an akcja, that the Germans are going to come and take the men to work, which they did quite often. It was nothing new. So there was a hiding place in the building. There was a lot of people in our building. They had a hiding place somewhere in the attic. And our apartment had like 2 rooms that could have been, that they decided to put a clothes closet against the door, so the second room would not be visible. And 2 of my brothers went to hide in that hiding place. And my father and the husband from that family, and I went to our room. But my sister decided to stay with the other women in the front, so she can explain better to the Nazis that the men were already taken. That's what she decided to do. But when the Germans came in, And they gave him a few minutes to get dressed because it was the middle of the night. My sister had no clothes. She was also only in her nightgown. So she was knocking on the closet door that my mother should be able to hand out some clothes to wear. This was the last time I saw my sister. And it was awful because there was so much shooting going on and crying and screaming. And we were locked in that room. And we had such fear that we all had diarrhea. So my parents had to empty all those cans with food on the floor so we could use the containers. And we were there till the morning. And there was a super downstairs who was not Jewish. And he told the Ukrainians, they had Ukrainians or Lithuanians that helped with these actions. He told them that there is a hiding place, and he took them to the hiding place where the men were hiding. And my brother Eli managed to bribe one of those Ukrainians, and they came and he took him to the apartment. He knew he would, and pulled away this closet and took us out from that room. And of course, they gave him whatever he promised. And he told us to wait till evening, till it gets darker for us to get out, because they only did it, section by section, because they couldn't eliminate so many people. And my mother went in and scraped together flour. She was always worried that we were going to go hungry. And she tried to bake a little plätzlach, looked like pitot, which she did. And then we went out one by one, hiding, because there were no people anymore in that area, to the next section where there were still Jews. I mean, there were many sections. It took a few weeks for them to get all the Jews out. And as we were walking, and she gave me, in a little basket I was carrying, she told me to keep this bread for my brothers, because they decided to go back and get the head of the sewing machine. Nobody, when I think back now, how come anybody realized what our fate is? They just didn't. They think they're gonna still be able to go someplace and use the sewing machine. It was so incredible when I think back now. So they were not with us, and as we went further, there was a raid. We got into that raid, my mother, my father, with me and my father and my mother. And they chased us, they were shooting people that couldn't walk, they shot them. And they were chasing us to this, there was a very large shul, it was called the Marshall Shul. And they chased us all into that shul. And in that shul, there were horrific things happening. My mother tried to keep me, I shouldn't be able to see all that. But my father knew that shul, that there were some doors in the back. And he pulled us out there, and we got out through a door. And we went, somehow we were able to get out and get to a street where my parents knew their niece was living there. And as we get to the steps, to walk into her, my two brothers showed up. And we were just so excited and so happy I can't even tell you. And I was crying because in the basket I was carrying during that raid, there were two little boys that came and grabbed the bread out of my basket. And I was crying that I was not able to save the bread for my brothers. Not that anybody could eat anyway. I don't think anybody was hungry.
Yeah. How did you escape from the ghetto? You personally, how did you escape from the ghetto?
It took a few days because there were raids constantly. And then it was like 2 days that they did not have raids. Maybe they were still, didn't have transplantation or whatever. And my brother thought the best thing would be we can just get out to Osmolice from there. And to do that, one of us has to go and let him know. And I was chosen because I was just a kid and didn't look Jewish very much. And we went over to the wire, to the barbed wire. And my mother was crying. She didn't want me to go. But I had to go. Somebody had to go. And my brother Eli, when the patrol was going the other way, he picked up the wires and I slid under them. And I got out, and I wasn't a brave kid at all. I was so scared. Especially in order to get to Osmolice, I had to get through a very, very dense and long forest. They always were telling all kind of bad things about that forest, but I had no choice. And I must have lied down there a little bit because till in the morning, I came and everybody came running to me. They couldn't believe that I'm here. And I went to my cousins, the Greenbergs, and one of them hired a man with a wagon, and they went, and they did find them. I don't know how. There must have been something said to me. They were able to find them, and they brought them out. My parents came out with my two brothers. They were able to bring him.
How far is Osmolice from Lublin, by the way?
18 kilometers.
And you were 12 years old at the time.
Sorry?
You were about 12 years, eh?
Yes.
Oy. Oh, okay. Sorry. You spent 6 months in Osmolice. What happened then?
We were always afraid, that soon there were so many signs and so many places that were taking away Jews. So we knew that it's not going to take very long before our time comes where we have to leave. And one day, was already the beginning, was right after the high holidays in October. They put up signs telling us that we have to leave within 4 days and go to Belzice, which was, I don't know how far it is, but of course they didn't provide any transportation. So they walked us to Belzice. They assumed to be a ghetto or whatever. Nobody would expect them to get transported to death camps. So my father had a friend, a Gentile friend, who told him if the time comes that he has to go, not to take me along because he knows a family that would keep me. So he insisted that I don't go with them. But my brother Eli said he is going to go into hiding, which many young people from Osmolica, cousins, I mean, all the people in Osmolica were related. They were also going into hiding into the forest. So I had no choice. I had to listen to my father. And a cousin volunteered to take me to that place because I wouldn't be able to find it. But when we got, it was the most horrible thing was parting. Okay, I'm not going to skip that. When my cousin took me.
Excuse me. I just want to say, my mother can't tell the story of her parents and younger brother walking away, which is the last time she saw them.
In any case, when I was taken to this family, they decided that it's too dangerous for them to take me in. So we spent the night in the woods, in the forest, and then I went looking for a cousin that I knew where he was, who was not too far away. And well, I didn't find him. I found somebody else, but that was a nice Polish farmer, and he was helping some Jews. And I had met his daughter there, and she was showing me her report cards. And somehow I wound up with her report card, and I because I really needed something, I couldn't have called Jochweta Finkelstein. I needed another name. So I had her report card. Yes.
What was the name?
Janina Kowalik.
Janina Kowalik.
Yes. And
Let Dani ask you.
No, from all places, you ended up hiding after Osmolica. You went to Germany. How did that happen?
my brother Eli convinced me that the best way for me to survive is to volunteer to go to Germany as a slave laborer, which they took a lot of Poles, and they were sending them to Germany for work. I absolutely refused. I just wanted to be near him, but he said, if I don't do that, I'm going to make it difficult for him to survive. So that made me decide that I have to do it. And
Eli went into hiding.
What did he say?
You went into hiding as a Pole.
Yeah, he went to hiding.
Oh, Eli went to hiding.
Well, you spent there about 6 months working?
Yes. I was the smallest and the youngest in the group that was sent, and they sent us to a place where they were building a ammunition factory. So I got a job working in the office of the architects, cleaning the office. And they were really very nice to me, the architects, especially the head architect. Yes. So, okay.
Okay. What was his name?
His name was Heinz Scheitling. And then we heard all kinds of things happening in there were many camps with Poles that worked. There were slave laborers. And they're being how do you say, denounced. That in many camps, a lot of Jews are being denounced by Poles, and the Gestapo comes and takes them out, sends them away. So we knew that it's probably could happen in the camp that we are. There were many of us. There were like maybe close to 20. We didn't even talk to one another. We just looked at each other. We knew who was a Jew. We were afraid to commiserate. So the time came when it happened in our camp. And by the time I was taken into interrogation, they already had filled up 2 cars. And I absolutely refused to give in. I kept on saying that I'm a Pole and whatever. I had prepared myself what to say. And I don't know how I kept it up, but I did, and they let me go. But I knew that I have to escape because they will then eventually find out and come for me. And I guess the head architect must have noticed something in my face because I was so scared. And he asked me, because he knew what happened, that so many people were taken away. I admitted to him that I'm Jewish and that I would like to escape. And he helped me. First, he wanted me to go to his mother's place. She lived in Berlin on one of the islands. She had a house, and he knew she would take me, but I refused because I didn't want to jeopardize his family. But he helped me get away from the camp, and he helped me get to Berlin, where I got to the trains. But that escape, I need a couple hours to talk about. So
you ended up in...
Unbelievable.
Where did you end up?
I ended up...
Yeah. Where'd you end up?
I ended up on the border with a smuggler woman, and I just followed her when she was running over the border.
The border to?
The border to Poland. That was not far from Lodz, because Lodz was incorporated into Germany. I went up on the Polish side, lying down, not being able to breathe, and then all of a sudden there's a man standing over me. And he took me into his place. He was living with his family. He was an escapee from Lodz, and he and his family lived in a farm. And he decided that I need a name and a Ausweis, how do you say it?
Identity card.
Identity card. He said he could help me with that, which he did. So my new name was Wanda Olas.
Wanda Olas.
Yeah, and I found a job.
Don't we have I think we have even the document of that, no?
Yeah, it's coming.
Yes.
There she is.
On the bottom there, yes. Oh, wow. Wanda Olas. Okay.
Yeah, Wanda Olas. I found a job with a family. Also, they were farmers, and they also had a little store. And I was with them for the rest of the war. But they were incredibly anti-Semitic. But they did not know that I'm a Jew.
You actually spent there almost 2 years, no?
Yeah.
Posing as a non-Jew. Where did the day of liberation find you?
I was with those farmers when the Russians came in, when I was liberated.
Okay, and what happened then? After the day of liberation, what happened to you?
What happened after liberation?
I had to choose I didn't have shoes. I only had those wooden shoes that I was working in. And it was January. It was, the winters in Poland are very hard. And it's been like a few weeks. And all of a sudden, I didn't tell you about Ellie, my cousin.
I'm going to do a little thing.
Yeah,
okay?
You're going to have to do that.
My mother her brother Ellie was hiding with help of a farmer, and he was exchanging letters for them. And she actually managed to get him the address of the farm in Rogów, and they were still exchanging letters. Then there was a really big gap between letters, and all of a sudden a letter came, and she could tell it wasn't from him. So she knew he was dead. And it was actually from a cousin named Jakob, who had promised Ellie that if anything happened to him, he would take care of my mother. So Jakob is the one who showed up to get her.
Yeah. And he found me carrying water to the house, because every morning I would fill up a big barrel with water. So I was so excited, and I said, the first thing I want to do is walk in and tell him my name and tell him thank you for saving a Jew, because they were unbelievable when they were talked how the Jews were being killed. I had such pleasure. So, but he said, don't you dare, because we would be in danger, because Jews are still being killed. So I couldn't do that. No.
After the war is finished, what do you do then? When and how did you learn you had some family left?
My city, Lublin, was liberated a half a year before I was liberated. So by the time I came back to Lublin, they already had an association, and they already were getting all kind of questions, people writing in, wanting to know if there are any survivors. And one of them was your grandfather, who was asking for his family. And among the names he mentioned was Finkelstein also. So I got his address, and I started corresponding with him.
He was in Israel.
With your grandfather.
Yes, in Israel.
In Israel. And he was the one who found the family together. There was also a cousin who survived in Siberia. So I got her address, and then later on she came. And later, quite a long later, I found out that my other two cousins, who also were in Germany, like myself, as Poles, that they also survived. They were lucky.
Uncle. Uncle. Uncle.
Oh, mainly what he told me about is that I have an uncle in New Haven, Connecticut, that I had forgotten completely about. So I got his address as well, and then I had started writing letters to them as well.
After the war, you ended up in the American part of Berlin and followed two of your cousins to the States, although you actually wanted to go to Israel. You settled, you married Reuben from Częstochowa and had 3 kids. What are their names?
How you named your kids and what
I named my kids after my parents and after my siblings. My oldest, Ruthie, her name is Ruth Bernice, so she's named after my mother.
Mother Rachel.
Mother Rachel and Brandl. And my other oldest brother, Itchy, was named after, his name is Isaac.
Your son is named Howard.
Huh? Yeah.
Getting the relatives confused now. Say your 2 sons' names. Go ahead.
Yeah, you can do it for me. Ruthie, I'll take a drink.
Okay, he's having a drink. So my next brother is Howard Isaac, and he's named for Chuna and Itche. And then my younger brother's name is Elias Michael, and he's named for Eli and Moshe.
Mm-hmm. Judy, how did you feel about Poland after the war ended?
To me, Poland was one big cemetery.
Did you ever believe you ever set foot back in Poland?
I swore that I will never set foot there.
Did you ever tell in details? Did you ever tell your kids in details what happened to you?
Not much. I was telling them about my mother, my family, but I didn't talk about what happened to me. No, it was just too horrible, and I just couldn't talk about it.
Let's talk about coming back to Poland after 72 years. What happened? You told me, and as you stated here, you promised yourself, you swore that you never set foot back in Poland. What happened in 2016 that you changed your mind?
It started very little by little. We had gone to New Haven to the granddaughter of my uncle because she had invited us. She had been to Poland, Lublin, with a group from her synagogue, and they were involved in cleaning cemeteries. And they made a film. But I didn't go for that. But Ruthie decided to go. And she said, Mom, you want to come along? Of course I would, because I want to see, even though my generation is not alive anymore, but I like to see their children. I always like to see them. I was very, very close with my uncle and aunt and these cousins that I found here. So I came along, and of course I watched the movie. And I was really impressed because in that movie, it wasn't just the people from the synagogue that did the cleaning of the cemeteries, but volunteers, Polish volunteers, Gentiles. They were really working very hard doing that. And I was impressed with that. And they also mentioned there's going to be a celebration in Lublin. They're going to be celebrating 700 years from the beginning. Well, almost the beginning, not quite. And that there also invited people trying to get Brama Grodzka was trying to get people from all over the world, Jewish survivors, to come and for this celebration. I mean, it was interesting, but at that time I still, wasn't very willing to do anything about it. Ruth, even though kept asking me, it's hard for me even to say how it happened. But my daughter, Ruthie is the one who got involved, and then my kids want to come, and my grandchildren, and my grandchildren said, "Mom, Grandma, if you don't go, we don't go." So that clicked it. So one can never say never, right?
Yeah. What made you then? 9 months after we had this reunion in 2017, you came back with Ruthie. You and Ruthie came by yourselves.
In the second 2018. Number one, when I met those people in Brama Grodzka, the first time, I just couldn't get over it that Poles could just do what they were doing. And, it just did something to me. They were just incredible people dedicating themselves to the memory of Jews. I mean, so the second time I came, because I knew that they do every year, the 17th of March, they have a special ceremony, memorial for the Jews that were taken out the first night. And of course, I know Brona was the first one that was taken to Belgium and killed there. And I also had no time at the time to see the museum. I was not able to visit the museum. And I wanted to see my street. And I wanted to see where my school was. There were many things that I missed the first time around. So that's what made me go. And I also spoke to kids in high school. I still am able to speak Polish pretty well. And then I met children in Belzec, from a city of Zamość.
Lubartów.
Lubartów, I'm sorry. But they come from every city, every year, different kids, different high school kids. And they have this unbelievable ceremony. And they have poetry and playing. And I was sitting there and they were playing old Jewish melodies, old Jewish songs. I was sitting there, my tears were just coming down. I can't begin to tell you what that did to me. And then as I walked out, 3 people, 3 Poles came to me. It was a Friday. And they came, they embraced me, and they gave me a holly. They said, you know, we knew Jewish people who baked holly, and we decided to bring you to people. We knew there were going to be people coming here. Maybe.
What did they say first? What did they tell you first when they walked up to you?
They said to me, we want to apologize for what we did to you, to the Poles, to the Jews, what the Poles did to the Jews. I mean, they were not born maybe yet. They were still young people. So, well, that was really...
You know,
that happened the year before, but it was at Belzec.
What do you remember from those trips, Judy? Sorry, do you want
What do you remember most of those trips?
The most important.
The most important thing.
What was the most important thing? I mean, everything was important. I think that Brama Grodzka, that's what's the most important thing. Those people, the dedication, what they were doing.
So actually, you've completed a full cycle now, 72 years later.
It'll be 71 years.
Okay, you're right. There's one little story, or one little thing that I remember that happened. I was there. I was present at the situation. Ruthie once told me that when you first came to Poland.
Can I tell this story, please? I want to tell this story. I'm at the airport with my mother, who, by the way, at that movie, she said she was interested in going to Poland. Then she changed her mind 5 times, but we won't get there. So we're in the airport, and all around us are people speaking Polish. And the woman turns to me and says, "Don't you tell anybody that I speak Polish. I'm not talking Polish unless you need me to translate." With her hearing, that wasn't going to work. Then we arrived there, and I forget where we were, in a restaurant, or somebody asked her, "What's your name?" She says, "Judy Josephs." I said, "Tell them you're Yochveta Finkelstein." She says, "No, my name is Judy Josephs." Now we're in Belzec, the same time, I think she had already gotten her challah, and we're in the museum, and Dani comes running in and drags her out. And I come out afterwards and find her up against the wall, the woman who wouldn't talk, and there's a TV reporter with a camera on his shoulder, and she's talking. I have no idea what she's saying because it's all in Polish, and she's been talking to every waiter and everybody in Polish now already for like 5 days. And the next thing I know, he asked her a question, and out of her mouth comes, "Yochveta Finkelstein." So she went through a little bit of a transition, and I wanted to tell that story.
A turncoat, right?
Judy, we're not totally done, but thank you. But there's an opportunity for me to ask Ruthie some questions, okay, if I may. Ruthie, without you, this whole Polish ordeal, I call it, wouldn't have happened, including the 2017 family trip. It seems like you became obsessed with it. You accompanied Judy, your mother, every step of the way, as if you are reliving it. Why? What happened to you?
I'm going to be really brief because we're already way over time here. But basically, my mother never wanted to talk. I always thought she should talk about it. The whole theory that you have all these memories that drive you crazy and you suffer. And boy, this woman was always suffering. She did go see a psychiatrist a little bit, never played it through. And one of our cousins who's done her thesis in trauma and basically I knew that if you start to talk about something, you gain some control over it. So I thought it would be good if she talked about it. And when she turned to me and said, maybe I should go to Poland, I just started the process. I didn't force her. I was actually afraid. I really didn't want to harm her. But during the process, once we were going, I'm asking her all these questions because I want to find the places to visit. I didn't know there was a 43 Lubartowska or there was a 4 Rybna. We figured it out along the way and then found out that my Aunt Branya was taken on the first night of Operation Reinhardt, which was the first action to kill the Jews. She was among the first people put on a train to a purpose-built extermination camp. So, and she started talking, and it was such a process, and it didn't take a lot to convince her to go back the following March. And I felt I had to do that. And then the family being together, like especially my cousins, the two aunts, the two cousins that she survived with, they'd already passed. All of their kids call her aunt also, even she's not their aunt. And there was a chance for us all to go together and, hear about where our parents lived and see it. Agatha's going to show a picture. So we were from 4 countries. We were 35 people. And just so you know, almost the last person on the left, there's Agatha, because she's part of our family also. My cousin Adele, who started the whole thing, is on the floor in front of the American flag. She's the one who went to Lublin, and then she came back. And that's most of our family. I think somebody was sick who were there. And there would have been another 12 if not for a wedding in France that week. So it was amazing.
Yeah,
I think that's enough for me.
I was lucky enough to guide that trip. It was great. That was super. It's something you never forget. You know, I live on that. But I want to ask you one more question. Did your mom ever tell you about what she went through? Did she ever talk about it?
No, she didn't want to tell us anything. She talked to a guy on the phone doing interviews. I've been listening to a lot of that. When she needed to do a testimonial to get Scheidling into, she used and by the way, another survivor came on that trip with us, our cousin Rose from Toronto. She's the one who survived in the slave labor camp with her Aunt Rose.
And I didn't mention that Scheidling was...
You're going to. You're going to. Yeah. I think we should let my mother say her parting words.
Yeah, Judy and Ruthie. Well, Judy, thank you so much for being with us, sharing your story, spreading a word of hope. Would you like to add anything before we part?
Would you like to add something?
Yeah. Well, I would like to add my feelings about Poland, Germany, and their people are very complicated. The Germans were responsible for killing 6 million Jews, including my family. Yet there was one wonderful German who tried to save me, who helped save me. I gave testimony to Yad Vashem so he could be honored about the righteous among the nations. And his name is Heinz Scheidling. How should I feel about Poland and Poles? When my brother Eli survived most of the war because of a kind Polish peasant who helped him hide and exchange letters with Tinas. But then his son and his friends in the Polish underground murdered him because he was a Jew. I swore that I would never return to Poland. For so many years, all I could remember were the terrible things that I experienced from Poles, even though I was aware that there were many that risked their lives to save Jews, including some of my relatives. And now, after all those years, I have such warm feelings and admiration for so many non-Jewish Poles I met through Brama Grodzka. So you see, it is really complicated. But this is what I decided, that no matter what sort of evil, prejudice, and violence one experiences, we must still be true to our humanity and living our lives as honorably as we can, with tolerance and acceptance of people who are different than ourselves. And I hope this will be my legacy.
Judy, Ruthie, thank you so much. Love you so much. And thank you everybody for joining us on that occasion. Good night. Thank you. See you soon in Israel. Thank you so much
for the statement, Judy, and a very strong message. Thank you for sharing your story. I think I can say on behalf of the organizers as well as participants, it has been a privilege and honor to have you today with us. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you, Dani and Rufi, for all your help and engagement. Without you, this meeting would not have taken place. I hope we will have a chance to meet again here in Lublin in the near future. Thanks goes also to our participants who are with us today online and were active on chat. Our meeting will be published on YouTube, and you will get a link to it via email. And at this point, I would like to invite you to our next Brama Talks, which will take place on September 10th, when Piotr Nazaruk, an educator and Yiddish enthusiast who works in Brama Grodzka, in conversation with Pliora Tech, will discuss the history of Peretz House in Lublin, as well as some aspects of secular Jewish life in pre-war Lublin. Thank you so much, and see you next time.